I know I can walk into any single room in business and I can get the deal done. It's really just like my emotional EQ, like being confident and calm. That goes farther half of the time than what's actually coming out of your mouth.
Alex Cooper, welcome to Forbes.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to chat with you today. You've had a massive 2024, 6 years of Call Her Daddy, $125 million deal with SiriusXM, finishing your second live tour, going to Paris for the Olympics. Like, it has been an insane past couple of months. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling exactly where I should be. I think that like whenever it's more chaos, I feel more at ease. Like when things are quiet and slow, I'm like, what's going on? Like I need to start doing something. So I feel really good.
Yeah. What has been the most exciting thing over the past year that you've been a part of?
I mean, I definitely think that this new Sirius deal is really exciting just because anything that I do that allows me to give the Daddy Gang more content, I'm immediately like, yes, this is fabulous. And a multi-year deal is something that's really exciting for me and most importantly, my audience. But I would also say my tour. I think like being in person with my audience is something that I don't get to do as much as I would like to. And podcasting is a very isolating experience. Like you just press upload and you can go about your day. And I remember in the beginning of Call Her Daddy, people used to be like, how does it feel? Like it's like the #1 show. And I'd be like, feels great. Like I went to the grocery store today after I did an episode. So it feels incredible to be in person physically with them and get to see what we've built as a brand. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and to take that offline into, seeing people face to face, I'm sure totally changes like your relationship with your audience.
It just makes me even more grateful because I think I see people writing in, like I'm in my DMs every single day getting stories about women getting cheated on or struggling with a toxic relationship, and I'm messaging these people. But to get to meet them, like there's one girl I remember that has been to almost every single live show and I see her every single time. So it's a really exciting experience.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. Okay. 6 years ago when you started Call Her Daddy, it was a very different show than what it is now. You were talking about sex and relationships, your life as a 20-something-year-old girl, to today where you're now interviewing people like the Vice President of the United States. Like that's a huge transition to make. Can you walk me through like what the transition looked like for you and why you decided to kind of make that pivot into a different sort of format?
I mean, when I first started Call Her Daddy, I had previously just gotten fired from my job. So I was pretty in a desperate situation. Like my parents were like, we can't afford to help you live in New York City. And I remember being like, okay, I just have to figure out what is my next move. And podcasting did not seem like the natural next move. At the time, really no one was podcasting except some of the older generation. I felt like my dad listened to podcasts. And so when I first started Call Her Daddy, I was really just trying to replicate what had been happening in my college soccer locker room. Like I was the most outgoing in my locker room and my friends were always so fascinated by what I would talk about so openly just because that's how I was in my house and my parents raised me like that. So the genesis of Call Her Daddy was being authentically myself when I was 22, 23 years old, talking about my escapades in New York City, and I loved every second of it. But naturally, as I have gotten older and I'm growing up, I have different interests, and as much as I still like to talk about my sex and not dating life, because I'm married now, but married life, I also wanted to just change things because I am naturally a creator, and I need to be creatively stimulated when I'm making content. And I think that not that it was a shtick, but like it kind of ran its course of only talking about sex and relationships every single day. And the pivot was really just natural. Like I think a lot of people are like, was it strategic? Of course, everything I do is strategic when it comes to my business, but it also was natural at the same time. I didn't want to just keep talking about the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And then it just kept growing from there.
Totally. What has the intention behind Call Her Daddy been like throughout these different phases of your career? I mean, like maybe once it was to just connect with people. Now you're having like very deep, insightful conversations about things like addiction, mental health, across the board. How has the intention behind like what you're sharing with people changed over time?
I mean, I think in an odd way it looks different, but it's always kind of been the same at the core. Like the beginning was, it felt like there was no one online for women talking so openly about sex and sexuality and embracing our sexuality, and men can have these conversations, but why can't we? And then I think as it progressed, I recognized how much people were enjoying me talking about things that weren't as spoken about publicly, maybe privately, but not as publicly. So I do think the natural progression was more of just like, oh, they just want more.
Yeah.
So what else? And that was when I talked to people about getting into therapy and being open about my struggles, and then having other people come on. I think it's been a really natural progression of just, this show is meant to bring people together, and it's meant to make people feel not alone in the things that all of us are dealing with. And it's just kind of like progressed layer by layer, and it hasn't really been this like very strategic, like on this year at this date I'm gonna talk about X.
Right.
Like a lot of times there are topics that maybe I haven't even personally experienced, but I know someone else has, and so I want to bring them on because I know my listeners can relate.
Turning that like love of empowering women and having conversations with women into a business is like a very, like you said, maybe it was strategic in some ways, but also like you just saw that there was like a need for it in the world. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you realized that this was something that could turn into something big? Like, you know, like you said, in your locker room at BU, you were just having conversations. So was there a moment that you feel like really flipped that switch in your mind of like, this is a business I can build for myself?
I think it is all based in my audience. I think a lot of times creators are very focused on creating, and they're happy when they see their numbers coming up, but I don't think that every creator has the intense relationship that I do with my audience. Like with the Daddy Gang, it is a two-way conversation. I remember someone randomly in business one time was like, don't ever listen to your audience, then you'll just be playing whack-a-mole and that's all I do.
Yeah.
I listen to my audience every single day, and that may make me crazy, and that make me be on my phone all the time looking at these messages, but it's important for me to have my pulse on what's going on socially, in pop culture, and also just what young women are experiencing. I think when I started to recognize how much every single week people kept coming back desperate for information, like I've learned so much from my show, I'm also benefiting from it, right? I think that was the moment that I recognized that like there's a lot of women that are not being served. Like we as women are underserved in this country. I mean, look at what is going on in this country.
Right.
We are still less than. So I think it was an obvious next step of how do we just continue to amplify for women. Then the business idea came of just continuing to push in ways that maybe at first it started as a show, and then a brand, and then a lifestyle, and now here we are.
Totally. And I want to get into all that and like the importance of like diversifying and expanding in different ways. But I want to know first, before we talk about like how you've built it, has there been a moment in the past couple of years that has been your like I made it moment?
I feel like I keep having them.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I remember the first time that I saw Call Her Daddy at #1 on the iTunes charts before I even signed with Spotify, and I was like, whoa, like this is epic.
Yeah.
Like younger me, I still can't really comprehend it. And then I think the moment of taking the show away from Barstool and signing with Spotify and having one of the biggest podcast deals ever, and being one of the few women at the top in that conversation, I hold that with great responsibility. So that was an I made it moment of like, whoa, yes, my bank account changed and that's cool, but like the brand itself so deserved that number next to it. And I remember so many women in the industry reaching out to me just like, yes, like I now know I can get myself a deal like that. And it was really exciting of how empowering that moment was for women. It like went beyond me. It transcended just Alex Cooper from Pennsylvania. I would say interviewing the vice president was kind of a big one.
Yeah.
Seeing Secret Service and being like, whoa, I didn't picture that for myself. So I think I keep having these moments, and I just try to stay as grounded as I can, and just I'm very grateful for what I do. I'm aware I have one of the coolest jobs in the world. So I'm just prepared for like the next whoa moment.
Yeah.
It just keeps getting better.
Definitely. I want to talk about that Vice President Harris interview with you a little bit. You, for years, have like sworn off politics on Call Her Daddy. You said, go on Fox, go on CNN, like this is not the show for you. Clearly, you had an internet breaking episode come out recently with the Vice President. I want to know a little bit about that. Why was this something that you felt was so important? How has the reaction online that's been, you know, in some ways pretty divisive, how has that impacted you?
Yeah. So I have never wanted to have politicians on. And the first time I did anything quote unquote political on Call Her Daddy was my episode covering the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And I remember when I decided to do that, it really wasn't that hard of a decision at all. I understood that it is a political conversation. Really, it should just be a human rights conversation.
Yeah.
But I remember when I did that episode, I was nervous only because I knew people weren't expecting it from me. And I was really, really proud of that episode. And to this day, it's probably one of my most proud moments of something I've released for Call Her Daddy that made a genuine impact. So when the vice president's team called, I was like, oh my God, here we go again.
So they reached out to you?
Yeah, they reached out to me, and I recognized that maybe in a different election, it wouldn't be the case, and who knows in future elections what I'll do, but this specific election, the entire focus is on women's bodies, and we're losing rights by the day. And so to have the most popular female podcast where most women listen to this show in the country, it felt like a no-brainer, just like, how as a woman am I not going to do this? How am I going to look back at myself one day if I have children and look back at this decision? I'm really proud I did it.
Yeah.
The second half of your question about the backlash, listen, I knew it was going to come. I am very aware that my audience is very split, and I, again, take that with responsibility. I don't want to alienate people, but I did feel like I had a sense of responsibility. So I kind of like didn't care. When I pressed upload, I was like, not that I didn't care what people would think, but I knew there was going to be like, cancel Alex and do all this. I have been doing this for long enough now that every time that happens, Matt always looks at me, my husband, and will be like, 2 weeks. And I'm like, 2 weeks? 2 weeks means 2 weeks and the internet will be so over whatever happens. And so not to like not take it seriously, but I also think you have to have tough skin in this industry. Like, people can say they're going to cancel me all day. They're still listening. So
so it's been worth the...
Oh, it was totally worth it. And you know what? It's like the noise always comes, the negative, and then it was overwhelming, the positivity I saw. Like, it was a lot of people coming forward and speaking up and thanking me. And just it also just created, I think, a lot of conversation, which I was really proud of. I think a lot of people were having debates and conversations over the episode, and that was exciting.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of a lot of media right now, is to get people talking, get people engaging in one way or another. Something that you guys spoke about on that episode, and I want to talk about how this kind of relates to your own life, is that not all women want to be made to feel humble all the time. And you, as like a leader in both the media space but also in business with, you know, record-breaking deals time after time, you have not had to be humble about your accomplishments. How has that sort of mentality impacted what you're building and how you kind of go about creating your career?
There's still so much work I have to do, because I can forward-facing come off as very, very confident, but I'm still like inside that young girl that we all experienced of like the shame and the judgment. And as a woman, you're told to just be quiet and like just like know your place and like don't upset anyone. And if there's a man in the room, like let him talk and like don't like stand out. And I feel like through this show, I have gained confidence. Like, I almost look back at when Call Her Daddy started, and a part of it was a persona that I was like embodying. And like, it's like when you go out with your girls and you're like, I'm gonna be this version of myself tonight. Like, I got to show up to work every single day as that best version. And I think it really transformed my confidence, because I have not always been confident. And I think as time has gone on, I have been able to, yes, recognize it's probably better that I don't feel like I need to be humble, as the vice president said, because why should I be humble? I'm so proud of myself. And women should also, any step that you make in your career and your personal life forward, it is an achievement, and you should celebrate that. And anyone that makes you feel wrong for that is trying to dim your light. And so I've just kind of leaned in. I'm having a great time.
How, because you mentioned there that when you first started, it was like kind of a persona that you put on. How different is Alex the podcaster versus Alex the person?
I'm more quiet.
Okay.
Like, I talk all day for a living, so I would say when I get home, Matt's always like, she just wants a chicken parmesan, reality TV, a glass of whiskey, and she wants to be quiet. Like, I would say I turn off, and I really, really like my alone time. I feel like on the podcast, I can't shut up, which is still a part of me. You know, I am a Leo. I can't stop talking, but I do have those down moments where I'm like, everybody leave me alone. I want to be alone for 24 hours, and I'm going to lay in bed.
I want to talk too about this new deal that you've signed with SiriusXM. When you spoke with Forbes a couple of years ago, it was right when you had signed your $60 million deal with Spotify. Spotify. Can you walk me through what this new negotiation process looked like, what you were really even looking for in the first place, and kind of how this partnership came to be?
Oh my gosh, it's been a roller coaster, because in the middle of all that, I was planning a tour and producing Call Her Daddy. It's like
getting married.
Yes, getting married. That's the fun thing about business is whenever something comes out, it's like, oh, and behind the scenes, I was doing 19 other things that some people haven't seen yet or you've seen so far. But it was an incredible experience to recognize that the brand had only grown since being at Spotify, and recognizing that this is a brand that is staying and here to stay. When I recognized that obviously my deal was coming up, I think it was just having conversation with everyone on the market, like every single player in Hollywood. I sat down with all of the executives and I just listened of like, why should I bring Call Her Daddy to you? And it was a very powerful moment for me because I remember pre-Spotify, kind of, not that I had to pitch myself, but I was really having to pitch like where the show was going. Like I was pitching, I was gonna do these interviews. Before I signed with Spotify, I had barely done any interviews, right? So it was like, I was kind of pitching the dream. Now the dream is here, and I'm kind of like being able to turn around and see like who wants to work with me, which is definitely really exciting. And I think any business owner, that's an exciting moment when the doors are just open now, instead of me having to bang them down and be like, trust me, like listen to me, it's gonna be great. So this time around it was more relaxed.
Yeah.
I was kind of like showing up in my sweats. No. I did go to one business meeting in my sweats because I was coming from an interview, but it was a lot of conversations because the IP has grown so much, and the Unwell Network now, I have many shows that would be coming with me that they would just be like helping sell their advertising. Obviously Call Her Daddy is the motherlode of the deal. But it was a lot of long conversations and a lot of just like what is going to be the right home for Call Her Daddy. Was
it the financial aspect that was ultimately like the deciding factor? Were there other parts of what these partnerships mean to you that really drew you to Sirius versus some other conversations you were having?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were many. It was not just financial. If anything, I knew the money would be there, and it was more about like what other things are going to people be able to give to Call Her Daddy and Unwell that will help us grow. I think the longevity aspect of building a brand, you want a partner that is invested in you, and I had that in Spotify. I think as business goes though, like sometimes you gotta just switch it up. Right. And I think with Sirius, them offering radio and different type of talent support, and they just have a vision for the next few years that in those meetings, privately, they were explaining to me a vision that I just couldn't turn down. And I think as a creator, when someone puts your creative at the forefront, that is a no-brainer for me.
Yeah. So. Do you, especially since you've built a whole brand off of empowering women and encouraging them to go after things that they want, finances are in some cases like a very touchy topic for a lot of women. Like you said, like in a board meeting, like, you know, women can be quiet, men can be the ones that speak up, all those sorts of things. Do you have any advice in terms of negotiating either, whether that's like a deal, a business partnership, a salary increase? Do you have any advice for women in, you know, going into these experiences and, you know, these conversations?
I would say number one, practice the conversation, whether it's like with your mom or your friend or anyone. Like when you have something that you want to say, I'm always practicing before I go in, because you don't want the thing you're leading with to be your nerves. Right. And it is nerve-wracking to go to someone in a position of power that is above you and be like, I think I deserve more. You could get turned down, but I think the way that you present yourself, half of business is the way that you're just presenting. Yeah. Like I feel like I am now at a point in my career, which I feel really fortunate for, because this is not how it started. Like I know I can walk into any single room in business and I can get the deal done. And half of it has nothing to do with my business IQ. It's really just like my emotional EQ. Like half the time I'm leading with EQ, not IQ, because that's what moves the needle. So I think practicing what you want to say to someone and how you are going to approach it and how you are being confident and calm, that goes farther half of the time than what's actually coming out of your mouth. So practice.
And is that like in the mirror you're practicing? Or
you can practice in the mirror.
Like what's your
I would write down what you want to say. I always have notes. I get that from my mom. When I go to my mom's house, she's like, oh my God, I have these notes from when you were in college, sophomore year. On this date, you said this. Like, I learned from her, write everything down. So notes, do it in the mirror or to a friend or call someone, but practice it out loud.
Yeah.
That helps though, because then the first time that you're projecting it to someone, you're like, oh, I've done this so many times.
Yeah.
Now you get to practice like your swag and how you're sitting and is my leg crossed and am I using my hands and am I making eye contact?
Yeah.
That's how I go about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I want to talk, you mentioned your mom there. Your dad has also been a big part of your life, especially in growing up with him in the sports industry. Yeah. And I want to touch on your Olympic partnership this year. You went to Paris for the Olympics, hosted your own show with them. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came to be and like how you felt as a former athlete coming back into the sports space?
I felt incredible. It was a very full circle moment for me. I'm like pinching. Again, I continue to have these moments in my career where I'm like, oh my God, young Alex would be freaking out right now. Because it's really cool. Like I grew up just hoping I could be at all a part of Hollywood. And now that I am in it, I take every day, like I'm just very grateful. The Olympic situation was really fun because Matt and I some days will just have brainstorm sessions where we're like, what do I want to do next? And what do you want to do next? And what like movie do you want to produce? And like, what should I do? And it was just one day that we were watching sports and Matt was like, I feel like no one really, really knows like how into sports you are. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I've never really flex that part of myself on Call Her Daddy because that's not really like what Call Her Daddy is. And Matt ended up getting connected with someone that worked at the Olympics. And then Molly Solomon, who runs the entire Olympics, was like, let's have a sit down. And I remember we went to brunch at the Peninsula in Los Angeles and I was like eating my eggs and she was pitching me the dream. And I was like, sign me up. Like, where can I get involved? And from the minute that I signed up to the end, it was such an incredible experience. Working with a company like NBCU was fabulous. And I felt like it was fun to just try something different for myself. I am very competitive with myself. And so whenever I feel like I'm kind of like stagnant or I'm like doing the same thing over and over, I'm like, what's next? What am I doing? And the Olympics was that next thing.
What is your vision for the future of Call Her Daddy, Unwell Chain? Like, what is the vision for Alex Cooper the next couple of years?
I mean, to grow, but not to grow so rapidly. Like we have no interest in making this like a 200-person company where it's like overflowing and I don't want to sign 16 more creators this year. Like I'm not trying to be in the quantity business. It is about the quality business and premium content. I do see when you start a brand, and it's so interesting because it's like I wish I had a documentary just following me around all day, but like the inception of Unwell, the Unwell Network and the company started on a piece of paper. And slowly, I remember Matt and I on a Christmas break, like drawing like how it would look and how it would flow. And to see now how it's already running, it's been a year and like a month, truly, that like Unwell has been like up and running for a year. And to see what we've done, live events, sold out events, throwing parties, in the Hamptons, throwing out the first pitch for the Boston Red Sox. That was a massive success. Like merchandise business that is thriving and making millions and millions of dollars. Like there's all these different parts to the business that are thriving. I think it's just to continue to rise all ships. Essentially, when one person is thriving, the rest is thriving. Obviously, I know Call Her Daddy is that like mothership. And so there is a lot of pressure on me to keep it moving. But I love pressure. But it's just to keep growing. And I think, again, it's like film, TV, podcasting, live events. That is what we're focused on.
How are you going about like staying relevant in the cultural zeitgeist? We've been talking about like just how fast this is changing, like trying to predict, like, is this someone with staying power? How are we going to keep moving forward? How are you going about making sure that that can happen for yourself?
I mean, for myself, I think it's like a little bit of both. There's being aware that you need to stay relevant, but I also think the people that are just chasing relevancy 24/7, they don't actually have a core to like, what is your brand? Totally. What do you actually stand for? So it's constantly checking in with the internet, but also knowing like, you know what Call Her Daddy is, you know what to expect when you're listening to an episode. And so it's not going too far away from what I've built, but of course dipping into reality TV moments or, you know, TikTok moments that I'm like, oh, I want to have this person on because they're noisy right now, and recognizing they may not be relevant in 2 more weeks, but if I get them on, it'll be great for the show and for the audience. It's a balance. Yeah. But not letting yourself get too caught up in it, because you also stay relevant by having a great product.
Definitely.
And no one's going to keep listening if the product isn't great.
For sure. What's your advice for up and coming podcasters or people who want to be a podcaster right now? Like, Do you even advise people to enter the space given how much more saturated it is now compared to when you started?
I absolutely would encourage people to, I think long form content at the end of the day is going to be something that everyone is almost forced to do if they want to have staying power in this industry. So I definitely think podcasting is the medium for that. I definitely think when anyone tries to tell you or pitch you what your show should be, just do the opposite. Like, too many people are copying people right now, and you should have as much of an original idea as you possibly can. How can you stand out? Because that's how Call Her Daddy stood out in the beginning. Like, it was so heavily edited. You don't even edit podcasts usually. I did. I was like, no, we're gonna edit this thing so it's like a vlog.
Right.
Like, you have to find your niche within this huge community because it is oversaturated.
Yeah. Being part of, the under 30 community, you made the list a couple of years ago. What do you think being under 30 means to you? How does youth impact like what you are building today?
Oh my God. A part of me feels like I'm like 65, but I'm also like still 14. I think that age is a very odd thing that I have kind of come to not focus on much. I think I am very aware that I have done a lot in my 20s, and entering my 30s, I'm now excited to continue to build and to grow. But I also think there are so many CEOs and billionaires that got their start at 40. So I think like any advice I also have for young people listening is like, there is no date or time that like, if you didn't do it by then, like it's not gonna happen. Like, absolutely not. Like for me, when I was a kid, I thought it was gonna happen. I'm like, I'm making these movies in my basement, Mom. Like, why haven't I blown up on YouTube? Like for me, I was like a failure in my brain. But it took me into my 20s.
Old.
Right. Why at 9 did I not pop off? Like, what the heck? So I think age and youth it's exciting, but I also am really enjoying aging and I'm really enjoying growing as a person because I've never felt more sure of myself. 22, 23-year-old Alex, like I knew nothing compared to what I know now, right? So I think, especially to women, aging is the most beautiful thing that you can do in life. So.
Totally. Do you have any predictions for the future of the media and podcasting space in the next, let's say, 1 to 3 years?
Oh my gosh. I definitely think the premium creators and shows are going to probably rise even more. I don't know how much, I mean, this is like too business oriented, but like, I don't know how much funding like creators are going to get now in terms of if you don't have a loyal fan base that you have like an IP and you have a catalog to show. I think people are more hesitant to buy into shows and to like give minimum guarantees. I think it's more going to be like rev share splits until people can see like your lasting power, which again is a very exciting thing for young creators. Like, don't be freaked out if they don't give you an MG and they're like, here's $200,000. Like, if you're just doing a rev share, I think it's a great opportunity for you to have autonomy and control over your product and prove throughout you building your catalog that you have lasting power. And I always say to people, episode 1, it's okay if it's not a massive hit, but the goal is by episode 50, someone goes back to episode 1 to listen because they found you somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I love that. My last question for you. And by the way, I love that business answers. Like, this is Forbes, give it to me.
I know.
This is not a business question.
Okay.
What do you prefer, the sweatpants or the blazer?
The sweatpants.
Yeah,
like,
right?
These are lightly unbuttoned underneath. I need my elastic pants on at all times. I prefer the sweatpants, but I think some people are always like, why the sweatpants? 1, I have been an athlete my whole life, so sweatpants were always the thing. But 2, I think I never want, when I sit down with someone, their focal point to be like, oh my gosh, like her makeup looks so nice and I'm feeling insecure today, or her outfit is so much cuter than mine. Like, when I'm interviewing someone, it's not about me. It is about my subject and the person I'm sitting across from. And so I know people were like, I even saw people with the vice president interview being like, how dare she wear a hoodie? It's like, I'm not gonna change for anyone. I'm gonna do the exact Call Her Daddy formula when anyone sits down in that chair, no matter who it is. And I was proud of myself for sticking to what I know works.
Totally, it's the Alex Cooper brand.
It's the Alex Cooper thing.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This is awesome to chat.
Thank you so much.